This is Dark Case Files. Racist lawyer insults white janitor, unaware he's a federal prosecutor in disguise. Subscribe now as we begin. In the high-rise jungle of Phoenix, where power walks in heels and silence carries secrets, there was a man pushing a mop and pulling the strings of justice. But on that morning, to her, he was just a janitor. White, quiet, invisible. She didn't know he wasn't mopping floors. He was sweeping for evidence. This is the story of arrogance, assumption, and the unexpected force behind a fall from grace. The desert sun hadn't yet scorched the pavement, but heat shimmered off the asphalt. The city buzzed with caffeine-fueled ambition. At exactly 7:44 a.m., a black sedan glided to a stop in front of Cantrell and Pierce LLP, one of Arizona's most cutthroat litigation firms. The door swung open, and out stepped Cheryl Lane Whitmore, partner, shark, legend. She wore power like perfume, ivory pantsuit, designer sunglasses, and a voice loud enough to echo off glass. "I don't care if he missed the filing. That's his problem. Tell Travis to call me in 10, not 11. She strode through the lobby like she owned the building. The clicking of her heels was a metronome of self-importance. Near the elevator, a man in a plain uniform quietly mopped a spill. Pale work shirt, worn name tag, D. Carter. He moved methodically like each stroke of the mop was calculated. Intentional. Cheryl stopped short. "Seriously? You're mopping now?" No answer. He kept working. "Excuse me. You're blocking the elevator." Still nothing. She rolled her eyes, now performing for the growing audience. "Do you speak English or?" The man finally looked up. Calm blue eyes, mid-50s, white, trim build, hands steady. "Just finishing up, ma'am." "Well, maybe next time. Mop before professionals arrive. This isn't a truck stop." She punctuated her disgust with a sigh and slapped the elevator button. Behind her, the janitor went back to mopping, even slower now. Upstairs, Cheryl's voice rang through the elevator like a victory lap. "You wouldn't believe the incompetence I just dealt with." Her assistant barely had her coat off before Cheryl launched into orders. Deadlines, demands, the chaos of the powerful. Meanwhile, back downstairs, the janitor finished his work. He walked calmly toward a staff elevator that didn't even ding when it arrived. Sublevel 3, restricted access. Inside a locked utility room behind a boiler, D. Carter took off his uniform. Underneath, a gray tactical shirt, a mic taped to his chest. He wasn't D. Carter. He was David R. Owens, a federal prosecutor from the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. And Cheryl? She had just become evidence. David opened a laptop hidden inside a box labeled Bleach. He downloaded the morning's recording. Cheryl's voice rang out. "Do you speak English or?" Every syllable was crisp. He typed a note. Subject made unsolicited verbal contact. Racially coded language. Maintained surveillance integrity. He wasn't surprised. This wasn't his first encounter like this, but it still stung. He'd grown up in Bakersfield. His mom cleaned houses. His dad drove rigs. He knew what it felt like to be ignored, talked over, erased. Now, he listened. He recorded. He built cases. He was here because 2 complaints from former employees, quietly dismissed, had raised red flags. But the DOJ needed more than accusations. They needed patterns, proof. So David became invisible. That morning, Cheryl wasn't done performing. In the partner lounge, she poured herself coffee and launched into another tirade. "You seen the new janitor? Moves like molasses. Took 10 minutes to mop one spill. I almost missed my elevator." Colleague Jeanette raised an eyebrow. "Maybe he's just thorough." "No, it's a vibe. Like he's watching us. Doesn't belong here." There was silence. Then a sharp comment from Cheryl, casual and cutting. "I'm not being racist. It's just common sense. Not everyone fits in here." David listened later that night, replaying her words from a hidden mic placed in the wall outlet. Every word, every breath. She wasn't hiding it. She just didn't know someone was listening. At 3:20 p.m., David rolled his mop cart onto the 23rd floor. Cheryl's floor. She was mid-call. If the client wants to stall, we remind them who writes the checks. They pretend they have options, but they don't. David cleaned the same spot on the glass wall outside her office for minutes. At one point, she looked up. He waved. She didn't wave back. She turned away and muttered, "These people forget they work for us. Not with us." Another moment, another entry in the case file. That evening, David retrieved another recording. This one captured Cheryl talking to a junior associate. "If you want to make partner, stop acting like you came here to change things. They want mirrors, not movements." And then the line that made David pause, "Don't push diversity quotas. Just work." He sat in silence, then labeled the file, "Escalation trigger." The time had come. Friday morning came like a thundercloud nobody mentioned. People walked faster, spoke less, eyes darted. But Cheryl? Sunglasses on, attitude intact. By noon, she was berating another associate in her glass office. "You think they pulled the deal because of me? Please, maybe the client saw you and thought you looked like an intern. You don't project authority." There was a pause. "And stop with the identity politics. Just work. That's how we earn respect." Outside, David slowly set down a wrench. That was it. That was the nail. He made the call. "We're ready to move." Quiet. No media. Just pressure. The next week, the firm received an anonymous letter. A request for records, personnel files, communications. Cheryl didn't even notice until the partner meeting. The DOJ had submitted evidence. Audio tapes, transcripts. At the head of the table, the managing partner opened a folder and said, "This one's labeled Partner Lounge, File 027. Cheryl's name wasn't printed on the transcript, but her voice was. "I'd like to speak with you privately. You'll get your interview," along with everyone else named. Her world began to fracture. At that same moment, David Owens walked into HR. No mop, no gloves, just credentials and a quiet voice. "Everything you need is in this report. You can verify my identity through the DOJ." And just like that, the janitor vanished. She sat alone. Glass walls no longer made her powerful, just exposed. She scrolled through emails. Her name was mentioned. 2 complaints. 1 intern's journal entry. A transcript labeled bias, verbal internal impact. Her own words used against her. And she had no idea how deep the investigation had already gone. She thought he was a janitor, someone beneath her, disposable. But the man with the mop was never cleaning her floors. He was cleaning up her career. And as Cheryl Lane Whitmore watched her empire crumble, she still didn't know what was coming next, because the next name on David Owens' list wasn't hers. This is Dark Case Files. Racist lawyer insults white janitor, unaware he's a federal prosecutor in disguise. Subscribe now as we continue. She thought the worst was over. A few awkward meetings, a tense email thread, a partner or two avoiding eye contact. That's what Cheryl Lane Whitmore believed. But Cheryl hadn't been fired. Not yet. She still had her title, still had her corner office. What she didn't have was time. Because while Cheryl scrambled to save her reputation, the man she humiliated in the lobby, the one she called just a janitor, had pulled the first thread in a web that stretched far beyond her. And it was unraveling fast. It began with whispers, a transcript here, an anonymous tip there. But by Monday morning, the firm's HR team was overwhelmed. Not just with files, but with fear. Due to a pending federal investigation, we are conducting a full review of partnership track protocols, lateral hiring patterns, and historical promotion metrics. All staff communications are subject to audit. That line set off a silent panic. People who had once chuckled at Cheryl's backhanded remarks now combed their inboxes like crime scenes. But the truth? The DOJ wasn't only investigating Cheryl. She was just the symptom. The disease ran deeper. Down in a temporary DOJ base set up in an unmarked suite 3 blocks away, David Owens reviewed the first wave of internal reports. Emails, hiring statistics, resumes that never made it past round one. Memos with code words like culture fit and communication style. He knew what they meant. He'd seen it before. When a firm wanted to hide bias, it didn't leave it in the language, it buried it in patterns. And the numbers? They were screaming. Minority hires stagnated at entry level. Promotions plateaued after 3 years. Lateral recruits? Nearly all white, nearly all male. He scribbled notes beside the graphs. Two-tier system? Unwritten rules? Key mentorship gatekeeping. Then came the folder labeled internal candidate evaluations. Dozens of employee reviews. Most glowing, until they reached one section, professional poise. That's where everything changed. For some, it was called assertive. For others, aggressive. Some were diligent. Others, overeager. Same performance, different labels. Bias didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered until someone amplified it. And David? He had a microphone. Back at the firm, Cheryl still had supporters, or so she thought. She strode into the cafeteria like she owned the place, made a sharp comment about gluten-free options, then sat beside Bryce, her longtime ally. Can you believe all this noise? It's a witch hunt. Bryce didn't laugh. You're not seriously buying into this bias nonsense, are you? Bryce folded his hands. Cheryl, they have recordings, transcripts. People are coming forward. People are cowards, hiding behind anonymous complaints. Bryce shook his head. He didn't say it aloud, but he didn't need to. The silence was louder than her arrogance. Cheryl stood, slammed her tray down, and walked out. Across the room, a junior associate leaned over to his colleague. She doesn't realize it yet, does she? Nope. She thinks this is about her words. It's about her power. One by one, employees began stepping forward. Some quietly, others shaking. A young paralegal named Amanda sat across from David. Her eyes were red. Her voice wavered. I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe it was me. Like maybe I was overthinking it. David didn't interrupt. He never did. But then I realized I wasn't the only one. Cheryl said things to me. Things like, "You're very articulate for your background." What does that even mean? David nodded once, wrote something on his notepad. Amanda leaned forward. I just want to work. That's all I ever wanted. But you can't climb a ladder when someone keeps pulling it away. Outside the room, a second investigator monitored transcripts. Dozens of employees. Similar patterns. Similar pain. One line repeated in multiple interviews. It's not just Cheryl. David plugged in a flash drive. Pressed play. If he's not a culture fit, I don't care how smart he is. DI hires just complicate the real workflow. They get touchy the second you mention standards. Each line landed like a slap. Each time, David labeled the file admissible. He didn't just have her voice. He had her worldview. But it wasn't enough, because Cheryl wasn't the top of the pyramid. She was a gatekeeper. Someone let her guard the doors, and someone benefited from what she kept out. Then, the bombshell dropped. An anonymous email leaked a firm-wide memo from 2 years ago, never intended to go public. We must remain mindful of our firm's image and the expectations of our legacy clients. While diversity is important, alignment with firm culture remains the priority. Consider discretion when reviewing lateral hires from HBCUs, urban programs, or non-traditional legal paths. The email was unsigned, but the metadata, it was traced back to the managing partner's office. David circled a name, Elliot Greaves, the same man who opened the DOJ transcript folder in that meeting. The same man who said, "We'll cooperate fully." Now David knew. Cheryl was the entry point, but Elliot, he was the lock. David met with the DOJ team. Are you sure about him? Positive. He wrote the playbook. Cheryl just ran the plays. Then we escalate. We go beyond internal review. Rico, a pause, a nod. If we can prove systemic bias as a coordinated effort tied to profit or performance, it qualifies. It wouldn't just be a personnel ethics case anymore. It would become federal racketeering. And Cheryl's insults? They were just Exhibit A. That night, Cheryl stayed late. Her office was dark except for her screen. She was reviewing emails, deleting old messages, scrubbing language. But she didn't know something. The DOJ had already mirrored the firm's email server. Everything she was deleting had already been recovered. She called Bryce. "I need your help. I think they're building a case against me." "They already have." He hung up. Cheryl stared at her screen. Her cursor blinked. And so did her future. David sat at his kitchen table, coffee in one hand, old janitor uniform in the other. He stared at it, not with anger, but with purpose. It reminded him of something his mother once said. People only respect the person they think can hurt them, until you prove them wrong. He placed the uniform back in its sealed bag, then pulled out a sealed envelope marked Phase 2. Inside, names, dates, a map of the firm's national affiliates. Because Cantrell and Pierce wasn't just Phoenix. There were 4 more offices, for more cities, same culture, same language. The DOJ wasn't stopping here. David stood at gate 12B, carry-on in hand, ticket in pocket. Destination, Dallas, Texas. Cantrell and Pierce, South Division. The mission had changed. This wasn't about Cheryl anymore. It was about a culture built on exclusion, powered by silence, and masked by prestige. She was the match, but someone else lit the fire. And now, David Owens wasn't just watching. He was coming. This is Dark Case Files. Racist lawyer insults white janitor, unaware he's a federal prosecutor in disguise. Subscribe now as we conclude. One woman's arrogance pulled the thread. One man's silence pulled the curtain. But behind the performance of power and prestige, there was something older, deeper, darker. This wasn't just about a lawyer who spoke too loud. It was about a system that counted on no one listening. But they were wrong, because someone did. And now it was time to burn it down. The skyscraper in Dallas looked nearly identical to the one in Phoenix. Same polished glass. Same lobby scent of citrus and cold steel. Same unspoken hierarchy. David Owens stood outside, calm, composed, invisible once again. But this time, he wasn't mopping floors. He was here as a federal prosecutor. No disguise, no cover. Walking straight into the lion's den with a warrant in hand and years of quiet injustice behind him. The receptionist looked up, startled by the presence of 2 men in sharp DOJ blazers. "Can I help you?" David smiled. "Yes, we're here for your files. All of them." The audit had begun. Unlike Phoenix, this office didn't get a warning. No anonymous emails. No staff whisper network. Just silence. Then shock. The managing partner here, a man named Harold Winslow, was a 30-year veteran of the firm. He laughed when they mentioned Phoenix. "Cheryl Whitmore? Please." She was a blunt instrument. "We run things differently here." David didn't respond. He just slid a copy of a transcript across the table. "Dallas? Oh, they're worse. They don't even pretend to care. It's like 1994 over there." Winslow went pale. "You can build the prettiest tower in the city, but rot doesn't care about the view. Spreads, quietly, until it's everywhere." As agents scanned hard drives and tagged printed memos, David found what he was looking for, the mirrored pattern. Identical to Phoenix. Disproportionate attrition of minority associates. Memos prioritizing client comfort over representation. Unwritten codes about who got the FaceTime with executives and who didn't. Then came the training footage. Mandatory new hire onboarding tapes. One trainer, a senior partner, stood before a fresh class of recruits and said, verbatim, "Look, diversity's great, but culture is king. If you can't talk like a country club, you'll stall by year 2. The recruits laughed. David didn't. He marked the footage critical, then labeled the Dallas file. Same structure, same fire. Widen investigation. While the Dallas investigation expanded, Phoenix was undergoing a slow but seismic shift. Cheryl Lane Whitmore's name had vanished. her office emptied, her picture removed from the firm's annual gala wall. But the damage she helped expose? It left cracks in every hallway. Jeanette Olaf, once a silent observer, now headed a new committee overseeing ethical hiring practices. She wasn't loud, but she was clear. This place has to earn your trust. We didn't always get it right, but that's changing. Now, Bryce Evely, who once laughed at Cheryl's jokes, had gone quiet. Not because he was scared, but because he was reflecting. And Candace, Cheryl's former assistant? She transferred to compliance and now managed internal training reforms, the very ones Cheryl mocked. Progress wasn't fast, but it was real. 3 months after Cheryl's final recording surfaced, the DOJ issued a public statement. Following a year-long covert investigation, the Department of Justice has identified systemic discriminatory practices within a national law firm chain operating in multiple states. We have secured testimony, audio evidence, and documented practices that violated federal civil rights law. They didn't name Cheryl. They didn't need to. Justice doesn't always knock down your door. Sometimes, it walks past your desk, quietly collecting everything you hoped no one would notice. He never raised his voice, never flexed his badge, never warned anyone who he was, because people show you their truth when they think you can't touch them. But the janitor they laughed at was the one building the case to bury them. In a brightly lit classroom, David stood before a group of 11th graders. No uniform, no hidden mic, just himself. Power doesn't always walk in wearing a suit. Sometimes it pushes a broom, and sometimes it asks the uncomfortable questions. A student raised her hand. "Weren't you scared?" David smiled. "No, I was tired of watching the same doors open for the same people and close for everyone else." Another student asked, "What happened to the lawyer?" David paused. "She lost her job, but more importantly, she lost the silence that used to protect her." David sat alone at his desk. The old janitor's shirt lay folded neatly in a sealed bag. Beside it, a framed photo of his parents. He didn't keep the shirt as a trophy. He kept it as a promise. Because behind every closed-door comment, behind every snide remark, behind every "she was just being honest," was a pattern. And someone had to break it. Cheryl thought power meant being heard. David knew real power was hearing everything and knowing exactly when to speak. One insult, one mop, one man who refused to be ignored, and a system that finally had to answer. Because sometimes, justice wears gloves. If the story moved you, if it made you look at your office, your coworkers, or yourself a little differently, don't let it end here. Like this video if you believe respect is earned, not assumed. Comment below with your thoughts or stories about workplace bias. Subscribe for more powerful, cinematic stories that expose injustice and celebrate those who fight it from the shadows. And share this with someone who still thinks the quiet ones don't matter. Because sometimes, the person you look down on is the one holding you accountable.